ready to go? Good morning all, and what a wonderful morning this is as we set out to launch our Excite strategy. My name is Caroline McMillan. I'm the Chief Scientist for South Australia, and I warmly welcome all in our room, our speakers, our audience, and of course our audience virtually across the state. Look, firstly, I would wish to acknowledge the land in which we meet today is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. We also pay respects to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people who may be visiting or attending or listening from other areas of South Australia and Australia. So, our colleagues today, my first duty of the morning, and what a great opportunity this is to introduce our Minister, Minister David Personey. Minister Personey, of course, is the Minister for Innovation and Skills, an absolute supporter of the role of research, of STEM, of the creative arts, the creative industries, and how creativity fuels discovery that will build value for our economy, build value for our industry, for jobs, build value for our environment, and support better health for all. Minister Personey, of course, before coming into Parliament in 2006, was a senior business leader, absolutely focused on the importance of manufacturing and of bringing a quality product to market. Coming into Parliament, he has held the Shadow Minister roles for Planning, Transport and Infrastructure, and as a Shadow Minister for Education, before in this current Parliament taking on the role as Minister for Innovation and Skills. Without more ado, I'd like to welcome Minister Personey. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Caroline. Terrific to have you here and to be working with you over my time as the Minister. Firstly, I acknowledge the Kaurna people as the traditional owners of the land we meet on today, and we respect their spiritual relationship with the land. And I will acknowledge Professor Caroline McMillan, the Chief Scientist here in South Australia, Dr. Alex Grant, the CEO of Myriota, Dr. Leanna Reid, the CEO of Curacell Limited, and of course a former Chief Scientist here in South Australia, Professor Richard Hillis, the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Adelaide, Associate Professor Maria Anasio, who is the Director of SAMRI, and Associate Professor Justin Chalker, Senior Lecturer of Flinders University. Welcome to you all. And good morning, and thank you for joining us here as we launch Excite, South Australia's Science and Innovation Strategy. This year has certainly thrown many challenges at us, but there's one thing that's abundantly clear, and that is the role of science has never been more important. We must unlock new thinking, innovation to solve some of the most challenging and complex problems that we face. Deeply embedded in South Australia's DNA is a commitment to social equity and justice and a passion for education and discovery. We know that research and innovation are key drivers of economic and social opportunity. Industry and research collaborations, new technologies and innovation are critical to creating and sustaining successful economies. Something that is certainly front of mind for countries across the world in the wake of COVID-19. Research industry and government share the ambition to place South Australia as the nation's state of science. The Marshall Government's 10-year Excite strategy captures that ambition. It includes clear goals to place South Australia on the top quartile of OEDC nations, measured for performance in the research, innovation and value chain, which are key to delivering better economic, health and climate outcomes, improving lifestyle, employment and productivity, and to transform Adelaide into a vibrant magnet city, attracting global wealth creators, innovators and investors. The Excite strategy aims to attract investment to commercialise research here in South Australia that will take local new products and services to the world. It will bring together leaders from across industry, government and education to ensure our brightest can access pathways to rewarding successful careers right here in South Australia. Excite will connect business with game-changing concepts to build our competitive advantage. It will attract innovators with proven track records transforming industries and communities. And it will power up innovation to broker new partnerships and establish knowledge transfer networks, set up technology capability hubs and develop a modern workforce in priority key areas. The Marshall Liberal Government is committed to harnessing the STEM research innovation value chain and has made an initial investment of $8 million to implement the Excite strategy through 2 new initiatives, including an innovation and translation intermediaries program to create stronger links between industry and research within our innovation precincts, and a South Australian Innovation Challenge to showcase the state's innovation capabilities, providing early market advantage for our local industries into global markets. The Excite strategy aligns with our Future Industries Exchange Entrepreneurship, or what we call our FIX strategy. Together, they will be instrumental in driving cultural change and, of course, major long-term growth of South Australia's economy. The Excite strategy is the result of extensive consultation across our research, industry and innovation ecosystems. It articulates our vision to transform South Australia into a state of science and a magnet for wealth makers here in South Australia. Thank you for those that have had a hand in developing the strategy. Without your input, of course, we would not be here today, creating a stronger future for South Australia. It is now my very great pleasure to officially launch the Excite strategy for South Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, very much. And one of the issues of our current times is we have to imagine the applause. So thank you. As the Minister has said, the times in which we're in has certainly shone the spotlight on science. As we navigated those fierce bushfires, the impacts of climate change in South Australia, Australia and across the globe, and of course the impacts of the global pandemic on our physical and mental health, we've become acutely aware of how science helps us understand how and in what way these events have come to be, but more importantly, of course, is how to begin to provide the solutions, both in the short and longer term. And this is, of course, against a backdrop of the role that science has played as that driver of the discovery, taking something new into an industry sector or into a community or into the health sector to really improve outcomes, both for a company that can achieve a new market for their products, for better health, and more affordable, but with a much more beneficial outcome, and of course, to support our environment. And so as we've understood the journey that South Australia's on, we know that we have faced our challenges in South Australia in terms of supporting our state go through an economic transition as we have navigated from more traditional manufacturing and industry sectors through to be able to harness that innovation from R&D, to be able to translate it, to have a meaningful impact on businesses and communities, and to be able to support the skilling of our workforce, the education of our young people through, so they acquire the skills upon which the future is going to depend. I'd like to thank particularly in our consultation sessions the hundreds of industry voices, the voices from R&D and communities who helped us understand what the priorities of the industry, our priority industry sectors are, and the role in which R&D and innovation can play for them. And so part of that discussion was to harness lessons learned from other jurisdictions across the world who have travelled this path and who have understood how the value of research provides a base for equitable prosperity, how innovation takes new products to market, and how becoming aware of how to harness those disruptive technologies can benefit us as citizens, our communities, and of course, our industry. And so the Excite plan is based around a value chain. It is based around excellence, that's the EX, collaboration, innovation, translation. Now, that doesn't quite spell Excite. We needed an extra E. That's the enabled future workforce, the most, one could argue, important part of this plan for the state. So the Excite plan came to be. And so today we've got a great opportunity. We have a remarkable panel here, and we're going to be able to explore from the perspectives, different perspectives of that value chain, the role of some of those strategies that are within the Excite plan. And I should say that I'm also delighted that our plan is launched following the federal announcement of some of the most significant investments in R&D and innovation that are completely congruent with the Excite plan, powering up the modern manufacturing initiative through great innovation districts and neighbourhoods, harnessing advanced manufacturing capability, business capability, frontier technology capability to really support SMEs and businesses come closer to the research that will give them the edge in the global market. So today, all of that and more will be discussed, and I'm hoping that your questions across the state come in through Slido, and we'll be able to prompt those as we go through today's session. But without more ado, I'm going to give a short introduction to our panel members, and I'm going to start with Dr. Leanna Reid. There, of course, as the Minister has said, she was our 4th Chief Scientist for South Australia, did a remarkable job, very tough act to follow, and has had an extraordinary career as a researcher, as a leader of collaboration through major cooperative research centres in biotechnology, which have delivered real market value, CEO of companies, chair of boards of CRC, and most recently chair of South Australia's AgTech Advisory Group, which is established as part of the state government's plan, of course, to grow South Australia's primary industry. So a terrific vantage point to bring to the Excite plan. Now, sitting next, of course, to Dr. Leanna Reid is Dr. Alex Grant. And Alex is an award-winning entrepreneur, internationally renowned wireless communications researcher and author. But he's also the co-founder and CEO of the Adelaide-based company Myriota, established in 2015 as a spin-out from the University of South Australia, and it aims to capitalise on that growing links between satellite technology and the Internet of Things to enable low-cost ground-based centres to communicate directly with low Earth orbiting satellites. I hope I've got that right, Alex, but I know you'll tell me if I haven't, which is wonderful. Now, Alex has, this isn't his first company. He co-founded Coda Wireless in 2004, and so provides a really clear insight into that journey one takes through research to discovery, to the translation again of new technology to define new markets. Justin Chalker, my apologies, is next to Alex, Associate Professor Justin Chalker, who actually earned his BA in chemistry and in chemistry, but a BA in history and philosophy of science at the University of Pittsburgh, that steel town that's navigated the economic transition to now be an absolutely hive of frontier technology companies. He was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship, which took him to Oxford, where he began his career in chemistry in the site-selective modifications of proteins. After several roles, he came to Flinders University as a lecturer in synthetic chemistry. He's been a Tall Poppy of the Year for South Australia. He's been South Australia's STEM Educator of the Year. And his work connects chemistry to environmental issues and provides a new perspective for us on the future in that area. Associate Professor Mario Ignaccio, sitting next to Justin, is again someone who has come to us from the US in this instance, where she worked at Kaiser Permanente, the largest integrated healthcare provider, in the development of registries of orthopedic care and practice. She was awarded several awards for that work. And when she came to South Australia, she's become the director of the Registry of Senior Australians, ROSA, which has provided an evidence base for better aged care, which has been recognised by the Royal Commission on Aged Care as having immediate policy impact. So her work takes in data, large data sets, population health surveillance system, and harnessing them to deliver better impact. And where new companies are beginning to emerge, as we see in personalised precision health, making certain that evidence base is there for the best outcomes. Finally, last but by no means least, Professor Richard Hillis, Pro-Vice-Chancellor at the University of Adelaide in terms of his role in driving research performance. But this has been after a 9-year stint as CEO of Deep Exploration Technologies, CRC, which developed transformational technologies for mineral exploration, and indeed won the CRC Excellence in Innovation Award. So what a remarkable leadership role, and of course was responsible and initiated the successful large MinEx CRC bid. He's established companies which have grown in scale and size and been sold to grow again. He's been involved in exploration. That has provided the technical base for other companies. And he's been able to navigate that role between research, innovation, leadership, both as CEO and as chairs of companies, as well as receiving recognition through senior and impressive awards from the Geological Society. What a career, Richard. Thank you very much for being part of today. So, with that introduction, I think now what we're going to do is we're going to explore the Excite strategies through the lens of these different wonderful members of our science innovation ecosystem right here in South Australia from all different perspectives of the research and innovation value chain. So just coming through, Leanna, I think I might start with you first. You're at the end there, so I think we might throw to you. Leanna, we've just heard about your experience as researcher, an innovator, a leader, CEO, chair, indefatigable in building biotechnology and agtech for South Australia's industry. Look, you know, as you've thought about the Excite plan and you've thought about the wonderful excellence we have and creativity we have in South Australia, what are the top 2 or 3 strategies in that plan that you would draw out and highlight as being essential to ensuring South Australia harnesses that excellence to have an impact?
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, I think the strategy is extremely important for the state and really is going to take us forward. First, I would say I think we have plenty of research capability in this state, and you've recognised that in the plan. The challenges that we face are probably twofold, if I keep it simple. One is leadership, and the other is bringing all those groups together, because we now have to address the new world, the scale of research and so forth, and being problem-based as opposed to bottom-up type research. And I think those two things the plan is really heavily focused on. So how do we bring everyone together in really productive, outcome-focused, collaborative groups? And how do we develop the leadership that's needed for that? And some of that leadership will be internal, because I think people are here if you put the right things around them. But otherwise, we've got to also grow our early career researchers, as you mentioned, very important, next generation, and import some probably as well to do that. And I think probably, if I'm brutally honest, at the high level, I'd say I've seen a lot of these sort of strategies before. The proof is going to be in actual how do you put it into practice in doing that. And I know that you have that clearly at your mind. But I think there are well-established, as I've seen, and I'm sure Richard has seen, ways of doing this, and certainly Alex, with his amazing background for how he could be so young to have founded all these companies. But one, I think to start with, your concept of intermediaries, doing that, because what you actually need are people who know, I know this person, I know this one, I'll bring them together and it'll work. They're not that easy to find, but they're crucial. So I think that's a very important strategy. And the other is bringing the systems together in that large effort. And I think the CRC program's a very good exemplar of that. And Rich and I think we both support that very strongly. That what you do is you say, here's a problem that the world, in South Australia, particularly in our case here, needs to address. Who do I bring together to solve that problem? Very different way of doing things from normal research. And I think that's what you're stimulating. And in the case of my CRC, we would bring together people who had never worked together at all, and people who were, this was solving new manufacturing technologies for cell therapies, people who worked with cells, but never worked with the kinds of surfaces, structures that we needed to bring together to that, and people who worked on physical surfaces, never worked with a cell in their life. They didn't have to really learn to do things differently. They just came together in synergistic collaboration. And, you know, the world's your oyster in that circumstance. So I think there are models around of the implementation of this, and the plan is well based around those. They're my key observations.
And as Chief Scientist, who's had remarkable success and was certainly key in attracting the SmartSat CRC to Adelaide, working again with remarkable partnerships with great colleagues to really support that CRC come. How would you advise this Chief Scientist to build the ambition of South Australia to lead national CRCs, rather than expect always to be a hub rather than to be a spoke rather than a hub?
Well, it's finding who's the person who's going to take the lead in this, and going to really go out there and herd the cats, as I tend to say, because everybody's there and can do bits of it. The people who will actually take the lead and really drive it, inspire, are not so easy to find, but we have them around. And I think we've done that in the CRCs, and South Australia has actually had a very strong success at CRCs and having them headquartered here. And state government support for that has been crucial, but it's really been the leadership. So it's really, it's fine. What is a problem that really everyone says, wow, we do have to solve that problem? So you're not just trying to do bitchy stuff. I mean, the drilling outfit that Richard came up with, you know, it's had a fantastic impact in the industry. So it's a real industry need, or social need, depends on the circumstance. And then someone who can look around and say, okay, I'm going to bring this person together and this person together. Then it happens, basically, I think. So not that difficult to do, really. It's just finding those two things. What's the wow factor thing we can address, and who is the person that's going to put the effort into bringing this together and be inspirational.
Richard, I think that nicely comes and plays that experience in reflection. And the other pieces are where sometimes you need access within a state to have, you know, that frontier research infrastructure to really be able to mine a new seam. Sorry about that. Or a frontier technology to give a whole field, whether it's in mining and resources, a new edge. Is that something that's important in building a plan to be a state of science, to pay attention to research infrastructure, and to be able to have those innovators in new technologies who can begin to help colleagues see why they will add benefit.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I was thinking back to the CRC actually, because it's interesting to look at the things you've done with a little bit of distance. And as Liana said, we developed some revolutionary technologies, either being commercialized or commercialized already. And they were all about interactions between geologists and engineers, bringing those groups together. The geologists were in the basic science and the sampling. Did you have enough sample to have a representative gold assay? And all that work came out of places like Adelaide Microscopy. So the excellence in the science was underpinned by that research infrastructure. And not all the audience may know Adelaide Microscopy, but it's a key piece of research infrastructure, scanning electron microscopes, all the rest of it. So that understanding and that excellence in that basic science drove a sort of paradigm shift in how we needed to sample, without going into the detail of that. And then we sat with, so that was the research infrastructure piece in that journey. And then we sat with the engineers and said, well, actually, how do we build a machine that will change the sampling paradigm? How do we build this machine? And we had to pull in SMEs and industry. We fabricated it at Century Engineering. We finished it off at Boart Longyear. And you really needed the CRC and its lubrication of federal funds to bring industry to the researchers, because there's a bit of an overhead there. But it was critical. And in every one of our projects, and I wouldn't be surprised in every one of Liana's too, we had researcher and industry partners. I think in terms of the plan, the innovation districts and the innovation intermediaries could really have helped with what we were trying to do in terms of bringing the basic science that had come from Adelaide Microscopy and then building things at Century Engineering and Boart Longyear. So that, that's the infrastructure flowing through to the innovation districts and the innovation entrepreneurs.
And we see often SMEs who hear about new technologies, but life is very busy. Just keeping your business above water is tough. Not really being able to think about travelling to Queensland or Melbourne to find out more information about a particular technology. Can't afford it. May not be clear about who the right person to ask that question is. Intermediaries and taking that catapult model in the UK and what we can do here can introduce those new technologies to SMEs in their neighbourhood, in their state, and begin to allow the try before you buy, the understanding of where industry leaders are going with it, and getting an opportunity in a sense to really be able to evaluate whether this is the future for the industry sector or it's just a passing phase. Do you think that might be of value? Have you seen other jurisdictions where that's been the case?
I'm sure it'd be of value, Caroline. What I always often used to think in running the CRC was this particular research issue is 100% of my life, but I'm dealing with somebody in a mining house or supplier. It's about 1% of their life. I've got to be realistic. They've got a bottom line. They've got a million things they're worried about, health and safety. And this realistically is the 10th email they're going to get to today, not the first. And so having the intermediaries who can help lubricate that and have the passion for it and can say, oh, well, we'll take a little bit off that. Appreciate you've got 10 priorities and this research project's only one of them. We'll just make that a little bit easier for you. I think if we can nail how that works, it could be terrifically useful.
Justin, I'm just thinking about your whole sphere of work, taking that synthetic chemistry through to environmental solutions. In that endeavour, do you see the industry leading in, or are you creating new opportunities for new types of industries?
In some ways, both. We have to recognize that there are problems that are defined by the industry and end users who will take up those technologies. But at the same time, we have an opportunity as researchers in science and engineering in all areas of STEM to develop entirely new technologies that will lead the way forward, whether it's in environmental stewardship or otherwise. And so I think the themes that have been mentioned so far is leadership and excellence in science, and having a way to broker a conversation and genuine collaboration with industry partners is critical for translating academic discoveries and interests into real-world impact.
Now, you came from Pittsburgh as a kind of poster child for the economic transition. Did you witness, and you must have been interested in the phases of that journey?
Yeah, it was certainly a fascinating transition from a steel-based economy, and in the period of about 50 years, transformed into something that is quite different. It's where the polio vaccine was discovered, the first liver transplant, and now it's a world-leading hub for biomedical research and innovation and technology. And so those sort of transformations require strong leadership, substantial investment in capital and people to ensure you have a longitudinal change and sustainability in that transition.
It's interesting, we're talking to one of the people who was part of that Allegheny conference who led some of that transition in Pittsburgh, and we said, you know, well, what was the main driver? And he said, well, Caroline, we were going through a near-death experience. And that brought everything to bear. So you wouldn't want to face that, but the lessons learnt on their journey have been extremely interesting. Do you think, as you look across Adelaide, I'm often faced across South Australia, well, we're a bit small. We're smaller than, you know, the Manchester effort in health or Pittsburgh's effort into the new high-tech industries. Do you think we're too small to achieve those journeys?
Well, Adelaide is about the same size as Pittsburgh, so the answer is no, we're not too small. And in some ways, we can use that as an asset because we can be more nimble and flexible. And because we're in a region that's looking for growth, that's a good opportunity to attract global talent.
Yeah. And in your area, where do you see the new coming from? What's the piece that's keeping you awake at night thinking, if I solve this, the community, the environment will benefit?
So we're certainly interested in all aspects of environmental stewardship and creating technologies that are innovative and take one problem and use it to benefit in another sector. So for instance, we have a priority in establishing new ways to process waste to make new materials that could perhaps capture pollution or be used in entirely different concepts and work towards a general circular economy.
You know, oftentimes I also get people say, and quite reasonably, look, that's not ready for the supply chain yet. We'll focus on what we've got that's good. And, you know, the research and innovation value chain is building the next good for market, but it's sometimes a long journey. And so the value chain, that drives the supply chain. It's always having something that you know is going to make that difference. How do you see Adelaide in a sense? Do you see, for instance, the Tonsley Innovation District being able to be a partner through to help the translation of the work that you're doing in the future?
Yeah, so there's certainly an opportunity to grow in Tonsley and address deliberately that very challenging stage of translating research discoveries into commercial products and services. And it will take investment, time, and a vision to invest in that translation. And that entails both the university side or any research sector as well as the end users and the industry. So all can clearly see the benefits in the long term.
It's quite interesting in the recycling world, one of the federal priorities, and that modern manufacturing initiative is in that zone, which is, again, something we've taken note of. Maria, very different field, health impact. How do you see that wonderful relationship of the work you were doing in the US with registries and its outcomes for industry and a health industry, as well as patients and healthcare, and then coming into South Australia? Take us through that story.
So in the US, I worked mostly with orthopedic registries at Kaiser Permanente, as you mentioned before. And the reason I ended up in Australia was actually because one of the largest, most established medical device registries in the world is actually based here in Adelaide, and is owned by the Australian Orthopedic Association, which shows that already, because they're one of the most successful established registries in the world, it came because of that partnership and because of that ownership of industry, of the data that they have. I think that without that partnership, it's almost nearly impossible to achieve the benefits that we do through the health and medical research. And because registries need the ownership and the investment of all, it's, we absolutely need to grow that partnership. And here in South Australia, with the Registry of Senior Australians, what we have tried to do is actually invest in developing these relationships with industry. So we've spent the last 3 years growing our presence and partnership and strength with the aged care sector. And we have demonstrated that in less than 3 years, we've been able to accomplish not just academically a significant amount of new discoveries, but also delivered the regulatory sector, the Royal Commission, with new information around safety and quality of monitoring for the sector that was absolutely necessary. And the industry sector is actually very passionate and very, as I mentioned, feel a lot of ownership towards what we have done. So I think South Australia is definitely a wonderful place for that, and has provided has provided with investment and has provided with the right mix of skills to develop it further.
Around you, do you see, we talked about leadership, and in a sense, sometimes across the world there are those, they can be called global innovators. They're people who do wonderful research, really top flight, but are really excited and passionate about walking into the doors of the places where there are problems, whether they're in health, in hospitals, or primary care, or aged care, or whether they're in industry sectors such as mining or biotech. Do you think we have enough of those as role models? And do you think there's an opportunity to attract those innovators to this great state at this time?
Absolutely. I don't think we have enough, but we have a lot of them. So prior to the establishment of the Registry of Senior Australians, there's quite a bit of research into aging and aged care that happened in the state, maybe not as coordinated and as connected as since. Since the recognition of the severe issues with the aged care sector have become more and more public in the last 4 years, and the investment from the department into this issue, we've been able to form a large partnership within the state of academics, of industry, of clinicians, of consumers that have brought these individuals together and through their networks. So right now there's about 13 institutions that made the Registry of Senior Australians happen, with 30 investigators in their networks. And through that is how we've built this enormous network of individuals working on aged care. And we've been attracting people from all over the world to work in our data. So nationally, our data is being used by a lot of people, but we've also brought researchers from abroad. I'm not from here. We've brought new talent into the state. We're growing new talent. We have PhD students. We have students that are working on our data now. So definitely there is some here. But through the strength of the collaboration that built ROSA, we've also been able to attract new. And I think for other projects and other issues, the same model should be applied.
We hear a lot about AI and machine learning being applied across all health fields. And we know there are also emerging technologies where satellites might connect to the IoT in the homes of people who've lost ability, to give them more independence as they age, or perhaps to provide independence for someone who might have lost that ability through trauma. Do you see a sort of scaling up and blending of some of the data, the harnessing of that data and AI, the bringing together of new technologies, in a sense to reconfigure how we think of aged care?
Yes, absolutely. There's a massive opportunity in Australia, and not just for aged care, for all of healthcare, which is the area that I work with, of doing a better job integrating the data that's already collected and exists through both the administrative side of things, through the clinical side of things, through the research, like federally and state-funded research, and use that data better and harness the technology that's already available from AI, machine learning, and develop new technology to learn new things as well. But there's an absolute opportunity for us to work better with the enormous amount of information that's already collected on all these individuals on an everyday basis. So the Rosette, and I'm feeling a bit like I'm self-promoting myself, but Rosette has been a fantastic demonstration of how that can be done. We've integrated data between the healthcare sector and the aged care sector and the social welfare sector now. And we can learn things from these people now that we couldn't 3 or 4 years ago because we didn't have that infrastructure in place. So that needs to happen in a larger scale. South Australia can lead it. We've demonstrated over and over that we can do it in smaller demonstration projects. But also there is a massive opportunity in aged care right now to use technology in a better way. And I think it's never become more clear that we can. And a lot of the barriers that are there can be broken down. So with COVID, for example, we've heard from multiple aged care providers that they had to do things differently. So for example, there was always somewhat of I think a bit of a, not a barrier, but maybe they weren't as keen as implementing technology for social connection of the residents because they say they're too old or they're not accustomed to the technology. But with COVID, they had to. And that became part of everyday life of the residents. Also, telehealth was another thing that for many years people have resisted. Medicare hasn't funded it well. So it didn't grow. But in the last few months, now it's part of everybody's life. So it's just shown that, and these are the low-hanging fruits. These are the things that should have been done a long time ago, but they hadn't. There's a lot more sophisticated issues within the aged care sector that we can address by bringing in new technology into that sector.
Later we might, think through Liana, who chairs the Health Translation SA, that academic science, health sciences centre, and yourself on the role of Adelaide Biomed City, the role of the emerging Flinders Centre in health, and how we make certain we bring that convergence of some of those technologies from other disciplines and make that a natural mix. For Alex, a journey from a highly credentialed researcher in mathematics through to leading a company and delivering on new technology in the space industry. For young people who might be watching this and reflecting as they look out the window on their future in South Australia, just take us through how that journey happened, so it now almost seems a natural outcome.
Yeah, I've always been inspired within my research career by those that have spanned a career of fundamental research, in my case in mathematics, that has spanned both academic research, really knowledge discovery, but then delivering that and even going with that into an industrial and commercial framework. You know, people like Claude Shannon back in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, spanning MIT and Bell Laboratories, whose mathematics powers every single digital communications device that we all have today, without which the internet and mobile telephony wouldn't exist. All because of bringing mathematics through engineering into products. And that's really exciting. And both of the companies that I've been involved with, Coda Wireless and Myriota, are Australian, South Australian companies that to some level are built out of mathematics and have gained a competitive edge on a global stage through bringing some kind of disruptive technology into the market. And disruptive technologies don't happen through some incremental improvement in something. That's kind of the steady state that established businesses make things a little bit better, a little bit lower cost, a little bit higher performance. To do something genuinely new, you have to crack some difficult problem. And that's where that excellence in research of understanding what that problem is, what the need is, what the connection onto a potential market is, and what benefit that will deliver to society, and then overcoming that then creates the opportunity. And so, you know, in the case of Myriota, you know, we're sort of talking about satellites and space and whatnot, which may seem very far off, but that is Australian innovation, yes, maybe being deployed in a satellite in space, but that is doing things like helping farmers manage their property, manage their water assets, getting us a lens on our environment, and so that we can manage that better. Ultimately, you can't manage what you can't measure, and just vast portions of our country and our marine environment are unconnected. And so getting those measurements so we can actually properly manage and understand what's going on, for example, in the case of bushfires or climate change, or more commercial settings of looking at our the infrastructure assurance for energy supply, things like that, or defence applications, all stemming from the ability to do communications. And I think that's really critical. And so for me, the thing I get excited about in a plan for science and research is that translation of basic research outcome that then delivers a benefit and makes the world a better place. It sounds a little bit naive, but that's totally what it should be about. And that's not just the flow of technologies, let's say, out of universities into industry. For me, that is a much more symmetric relationship and collaboration and flow of people, because people are the actual capability. Occasionally you can have a piece of IP that you can license and someone runs off with it. But, both of the companies I've been involved with have been successful because, yes, of course, there's been IP, but it's been the people who've then taken that forward and then, delivered the outcome.
We heard about the Minister spoke for his vision and the Premier's vision that Adelaide will be a magnet city, sticky for talent. Really, as we're looking at the generation of creative thinkers who really do want to come to places that understand, the source and the origin and provenance of their clothes, their food, their energy. They want a place where there's a purpose and value, but where creativity as a driver, whether it's in the arts or in STEM or in industries, defines, as it were, a city and state. Do you consider that in your area that's too high an aspiration, or do you consider that you can see some of that happening in Lot 14? What's your view of that?
So 2 of our company values, one of them is think big, and the other one is keep it real. And on this topic of being a magnet city, that is something where I love the fact that we can have the confidence to think big, and actually that it is real. We are seeing people when we're advertising for staff, for example, we are getting applications from all over Australia, hundreds and hundreds of people, and from international, from overseas, of people who are seeing, they're attracted to an opportunity, not just to participate in something that's high tech and it's space, but in that's leveraging high technology to do something that has a purpose. And that's the thing that I've learnt from young people, and it's fantastic. And I recommend everyone get what I think of as a reverse mentor, a younger person to be a connection onto that next generation to understand how people think. I've realised that element of wanting to do exciting things that are science-based, but that has really a genuine prospect of making things better. And so that then brings people and attracts people, and getting a critical mass of that is really important. For this state, it's not an accident that the Australian Space Agency is headquartered in Adelaide. It's not an accident that the SmartSat CRC is headquartered in Adelaide. Those things are there because there is that building critical mass. And when we see that play out on the global stage, the proximity to institutions like that has such a massive flow-over effect for other parts of industry. And we're seeing that spread out. We're a company that delivers a particular piece of the value chain of connectivity. Our products are manufactured by an Adelaide-based company that has a really robust and high-quality supply chain and manufacturing line that is a descendant of the work they did for the auto industry. Now they pivoted, they're doing space manufacturing. We sell those little electronics modules to other Australian and other global companies, but other South Australian and Australian companies who integrate that into products that they are designing and manufacturing in Australia and selling to Australian companies to use out in the field so they can measure data, so they can manage their businesses and ultimately improve the world. And so you can really see that building, so that scale and the confidence to do that, and then sort of the attraction that brings, that's real, and that's today. So I think that's really an area absolutely we should be backing and investing in.
So look, thank you for that. One of the issues, vexed issues, when we invited you on to this panel and you very graciously agreed, you made it very clear. You cannot be on a panel unless there is equal representation of men and women. Fortunately, we would not set up a panel without that prerequisite. Can you just speak briefly to the issue that's allowed you to see that diversity for STEM and its creativity and its innovation and the leadership there is actually key to both equity, but equally to productivity?
Yeah, interesting that you found out about that. But yeah, that's a blanket rule that I have for going on panels. Anyway, we won't get sidetracked there. But in terms of STEM and diversity, so I've kind of got a couple of ways I think about this. There's undeniable commercial advantage to be gained by having a diverse and inclusive workforce, and that's been documented widely. So just from a pure hard-nosed commercial viewpoint, that is the outcome that you want. The other side of me believes that no one should be denied to pursue a rewarding career of their choosing, either kind of intentionally, as was the case with my own mother, who was prevented from going to university by her father because university wasn't for girls, through to, and I hope that's not the case of anyone in 2020, but what we do see is that unintended or subconscious bias of very early on directing people one way rather than another way. And so at Myriota, we are very passionate about providing the opportunity and building a culture, an environment, a way that we work that offers opportunity for anybody. And particularly within aerospace and engineering, we know there's underrepresentation by females. We have, let's say, let go recruiters who give up on this. We need such and such an engineer. I'll find you the right man for the job. Excuse me, male wasn't part of the job description. Well, that's all you're going to get. I don't accept that. However, we do recognise that the pool from which you might draw is small. And so then there's this other earlier stage issue then of working with schools, young people, to show the real visible role models that people can aspire to be, and show that that is a genuine pathway. We had some work experience students come through earlier in the year. And one of them, a Year 11 girl from Port Pirie, through her exposure to a company, and actually several other companies, all based on Lot 14, and they rotated around, and through exposure to people like Pamela Milroy, real-life astronaut, and on our board, has then formed a view, I'm going to be an astronaut. And not in the way, I'm going to be an astronaut, but genuinely, right, what's the steps I need to take? What do I need to study? How do I get there? I'm going to do it.
Thank you for that. And I'm just hearing, Justin, STEM Educator of the Year, you've done such great work. And in promoting those pathways and the characteristics and the issues about how can we have the supply of wonderful, skilled individuals, no matter their background, no matter gender, no matter their location, to really achieve their dreams, but also so South Australia can be able to harness that talent. What have you found? In the plan, we have diversity for STEM. We are clear about that. South Australia has always carried a very clear view of equity and excellence, never mutually exclusive, but also being at the heartland of being first in supporting and breaking barriers and boundaries. How do you think, as from your perspective as an educator, what are your reflections on the strategies that need to be put in place?
Well, as Alex has reflected, I agree entirely that if you want to solve some of the most challenging problems we face, not just in science, but in society at large, why would we not train, recruit, and mentor all of the talent across the entire population, rather than focusing on a thin slice of a pool? We need to cultivate these talents and capabilities and skills across all people. And in university education in particular, we have the opportunity to do that by deliberate, targeted programs to support women scientists and First Nation scientists. And in order to do that, I think we can provide specific scholarship support to recruit specifically those groups of people that are traditionally underrepresented, but then also establish a longitudinal commitment to mentor them throughout that education program, so that when they come out, they are trained and ready to diversify the pool to go work at Alex's company, for instance, and elsewhere in South Australia. And I think the same applies to recruiting and nurturing talent from regional South Australia as well. So all of these areas should be priorities for the university sector.
Well, we look forward to forming that diversity for STEM champions group, which is going to, we know so much good work and so many leaders are leading change. And it's the role of the Excite plan really to bring together and scale up that work so that champions don't burn out, and so their outcomes that show great impact we can scale. And also I think that annual Future Workforce Forum to make sure our demand and supply for our industries. Interesting, in Pittsburgh they almost hit a wall there where the supply for those industry sectors coming in high-tech areas wasn't meeting the demand. And so, you know, Adelaide's got an opportunity here to really think through that systematically. We've got some fabulous work in innovation and skills that is really building those databases that can be harnessed. Now that we've been having such a great conversation and listening to our colleagues and their reflections, but we've got a whole slate of questions. So, and I should call out, I think, to those of you, because we're going to try and get through as many questions as we can from our virtual audience. If you want to connect with us, open a browser. I should be giving this to the high-tech guys in Punch. Go to www.sli.do. Join with the event code #Excite and submit your questions or vote for questions submitted. So they will find their way to the top of the list through space technology or not. Okay, colleagues, good question here, which is, I think, reasonably something that people may be somewhat front of mind. What do you think the key opportunities are arising from the federal budget commitments to research and innovation as of Tuesday for South Australia? As you're looking around in leaders and you're trying to going through the fine print, just almost the headline areas is fine. If we go down the panel, Richard, what did you see that you thought, Excite, Fix, industry growth plans, we could turbocharge this, taking the lead from the federal government's commitments?
Yeah, for me, it's the modern manufacturing challenge. What's the number, Callum? 1.2 billion?
1.6?
1.6 billion. I got the wrong decimal point. You know, and there's 6 areas there, some of which look very attractive to South Australia.
Yeah.
So there's resources, there's defence, there's space. So I imagine you and I and others will be getting together to make a South Australian play for those. And if we can just connect them into your innovation districts in the plan and innovation hubs and whatnot, then terrific. Surely we can connect the space and defence ones into Lot 14. Yeah. Surely, you know, just let's get the bids out there and let's do it.
Scaling up.
Yep.
We've been talking about scaling up, and we're prepared because of the industry consultations that have delivered those plans with priorities, the fixed plan with this entrepreneurship startup and building that high-tech plan that's going to then really enable, and of course the Excite plan looking to leverage all of that opportunity. Leanna, what have you seen as you've
I
scanned
think
the
this
pages?
manufacturing funding is tremendous. As I understand it, the federal government focus is they feel that there's been a lot of effort in the biomedical space, and there's more of a focus away towards other technologies. So I think we need to take that into account, that that's where the opportunities will be from this particular budget. And there is thought, for example, to have a equivalent of the Biomedical Translation Fund, which has set up venture capital for biomedical, but not make it biomedical. So I think we've got to look at those areas. And the other focus, I think, is someone was telling me, it's a bit like going back in 2013, there was a push to say, look, we're doing all this research, but we're not taking it into practice. We've got to focus on that. And I think it's come back to that again a bit too. So translation is going to be important. And I think, therefore, your plan, which is about excellence but also putting into practice, and across the board, it's not specific to certain sectors, but I think we need to think hard about that. We are strong in the biomedical space in South Australia, but we've also got lots of other capability, as Alex has described. So they will be something we will need to take into account.
Thank you. Justin, your reflections on that?
Yeah, so certainly I agree that the priority in next generation manufacturing is important, but I was also pleased to see a commitment to sustainability, whether that's focusing on circular economy or new concepts in recycling that add value to industries, and also some investment that coordinates with the research excellence in sustainable energy in South Australia. And I think both of these dovetail well with the priority for the Excite plan to recruit and retain global talent and develop technologies here that can be used by those industries.
What a wonderful baseline. Our renewable energies history, both as showcasing what you can do against fierce, sometimes criticism, but also showing how you can then move to build the hydrogen roadmap, and it being an attractant for those with foresight and understanding this is the way of the future. Alex, do you see things within that federal government's plan in the same way as opportunities?
Yeah, I think everyone's mentioned the investment into manufacturing, and I think I was on a session yesterday with Minister Andrews where she was describing those 6 priority areas are areas where Australia either has some kind of natural advantage or there is a strategic imperative. So, things like defence and space, our food supply chain, and minerals, and one other one which has gone from my brain. But it's like that's really important. So we're really interested to see how that flows out. There was discussion around the sort of collaboration and sort of clustering aspects that might be part of that, which I think is really important. I'm really pleased to see that there's a commitment to investment in female founders for startups. I think that's fantastic, and some other support things aiming at ultimately diversity, which is fantastic.
Terrific. Maria, we've heard health may not be in the spotlight, but it may be good spear carrying if you're not the soloist. But we did see some medical products being highlighted as part of that list.
Yeah.
How do you see what's going to scale up and how the federal government may?
I think one of the things that we've discussed the most from the budget being announced recently is some new support for the aged care providers themselves, which again gives us opportunities for the next few years, especially as it relates to your plan. There has been a massive need for quite some time for additional funding for specific services, and then the evaluation and then the research that goes behind the support of all that. And some of that did get announced. I don't think people were as optimistic about as much as it should be, but it is, every little bit counts. So we're actually happy that there is quite a bit of influx of funding for the providers themselves that will translate into us having more support as well to evaluate and kind of follow that up in the next few years.
Step changes informed by strong evidence.
Exactly.
Now, another question: do panel members think that commercialisation of science and technology products and services is going to become more competitive, Leanna?
I'm not sure what you mean by competitive. I mean, we're in a global world, of course, so we're competing everywhere. In that sense, yes, a lot more competitive. But I think the opportunities are huge as well. So, and I don't think we've taken enough advantage of that. So, I would put my money in the balance of things on the opportunities rather than the competitive side of things.
So enough venture capital, Richard, around?
Oh, we could do with more venture capital in Australia, but you know, I think people underestimate how competitive it is. In my space, it's always an interesting stat, might have been knocked off by the gold price soaring recently, but until recently we did about 15 billion exports annually in gold, which was less than our exports in mineral exploration technologies and mining technologies in drills and survey planes and models. So it is a competitive business. It's a big competitive business. Are we as good at capturing it as we should? I think that was early on in the discussion. Maybe Leanna said it, that we sometimes don't capture it in Australia and sometimes we think the US is better at capturing it. And you know, if we could drive that through the plan, if we could drive that through our intermediaries in our districts, I would love to see that.
Can you see issues, ways in which we can enhance that opportunity, Alex, in Lot 14 or through high-tech
I think Australia and South Australia is absolutely competitive on the global stage for commercialisation of high-tech research output, where I think sometimes people might confuse competitiveness with scale. And so, you know, you'll see places like Silicon Valley where it's just a bigger scale. The stuff that people are doing there is not fundamentally more amazing than stuff that people are doing right here in Adelaide. What there is there's just a larger ecosystem, which, by the way, we get to participate in as well. There has been very strong year-on-year growth of venture capital in Australia. Could it be bigger? Yes. But compared to 5 years ago, it's gone from almost non-existent to being something that is growing. And I think there's never been a better time to be commercialising high-tech stuff in Australia. Now, there's funds like Main Sequence Ventures that are set up expressly to invest in deep technology, for example, and then other funds sort of getting on board, and then they're bringing in partners from outside of the country to then leverage on those investments. You know, I think it's never been a better time to do that kind of activity.
Now, a couple of, look, it's great to see some questions coming up here, but which are more focused on how to get involved in Excite. So what support will be available to schools, university and groups to increase the diversity in STEM? This is great leaning in, and the opportunity here, of course, is rather than try and replicate great pieces of work, is to begin to bring that work together to showcase the champions, showcase the scale, and make sure strong evidence that we may well need a registry of what works so that we can deploy that more quickly. I also think the skills agenda, we're seeing those micro-credentials. If you missed the maths at any key point in your schooling, for whatever reason, the opportunity not to miss that mathematical talent and do a micro-credential which networks in a pathway and you through a pathway to a different outcome than if it didn't exist. I think we'd all say that universities are moving away from the linear pathway, that you're really locked out if your ATAR didn't get you there in the first instance. So making certain opportunity, I think matter where colleagues think of Hillary Clinton, her quote, "Talent is everywhere, opportunity is not." Making that opportunity available. So that Diversity in STEM Champions group, and we'll be reaching out to schools, universities and groups as colleagues do in innovation and skills as we speak, and make those skills pathways much more visible and make certain they don't end in limited outcomes. In defence and space, particularly, we can't afford that. Now, also, two last questions. And I'm going to configure a bit. One of our own thoughts and questions. One of the questions is, what will science and innovation in South Australia look like in 30 years' time? Okay, so just one area, one thought. It might be a starshot thought. It might be something you've been always incubating and wanting to see happen. Let's quickly go along our panel. Maria.
So right now, South Australia hosts maybe, I think it's 12 or 13 nationally established registries right now that monitor specific cohorts of people, or specific people with specific implants or disease cohorts. And these registries, while somewhat underfunded, undersupported, and just kind of, making their way along, have already provided so much information that has changed so many different aspects of different fields. 30 years from now, what would I like to see? That we were somewhat of a health and medical research data hub in South Australia. We have the capabilities, we have the baseline, we have the starting people with the right drive, with the right skills, where we could be like the actual powerhouse of the people that really do monitor surveillance of, in health and medical research.
We are the state of health.
Yes.
Built on the state of science.
That's what
I don't know
we
if it
like.
will fit in the car number plates, but we'll go for that. Justin.
Well, one of the most exciting things about science and research in particular is that we're venturing into the unknown every time we go into the lab or the field and do an experiment. So in some sense, we don't know what's ahead of us in 30 years, and that's exciting. What I would like to see, though, is a strong commitment to sustainability, where we ensure sustainable energy, conservation of water and other resources, and do that in a way that's carbon neutral to preserve our environment for the future of humanity.
Keeping true to our DNA.
Indeed.
Yeah. Richard.
I would love to see 3 ASX 200 companies based on technology headquartered in Adelaide.
Alex is going to say just 3.
Well, one of them can be his.
So, and that journey, when do you think that will occur? Is it in the first 10 or is it in the last 10 of those 30?
No, we're 10 years out from
10
one of
years
them,
out.
and we've got to start with the steps in the plan. But that's got to be the goal.
Alex, would you agree with that, or what do you see?
Well, I was actually at something where the Space Agency was talking about their plan to achieve a $19 billion space industry, and it's like, well, that's just 19 unicorns. That's all we need. One thing I think we're going to see, and we will see, I think even sooner than the next 30 years, we will see an Australian flag that is representing technology and contribution, not just from Australia, but from South Australia, that will fly on the Artemis mission to the moon, and then further to Mars. That is going to happen, and it's already underway.
The Mars shot.
So if young people are interested in that type of activity, now's the right time to be a young person studying STEM subjects. You're at the right age to be then coming into that program to deliver that kind of astounding outcome. The groundwork's been done, the connections are there, there's the partnership between NASA and the Australian Space Agency, and all the seeds are there to now deliver on that vision. And I think that's incredibly exciting.
Liana.
A bit more on what Richard was saying. I think I'd say we will have at least 2 absolute global headquarters of major industries here. And if I put my bets on it, one will be in space technologies, the other one hopefully the hydrogen economy. And we'll, in a sense, what we'll have is 2 CSLs headquartered in Adelaide. I mean, CSL is the world's top blood products company. It got there in a pretty short time in the scheme of things, so we can do that too. The other thing I would say, we'll have at least 5 Nobel Prize winners more.
Good. Excellent. And they'll all be women. Yeah, we'll just sort of lift it a little there. Yes.
And some Indigenous people too.
And Indigenous. Colleagues, very quick. This is a very serious question, and so a lot rides on it. I've heard that scientists often come up with their best ideas after work when they've gone to the pub and had a couple of beers. Is that true? Okay, Richard, true or false?
True.
Yeah. What best idea did you come up with?
That we didn't have to put screw drill rods together, that we could make it a continuous coil.
Gosh.
There was a lot of beer in that.
Yeah. I wonder what the people next door were thinking when you talk about that one.
Yeah, these are odd people.
Maria.
It's very true, yes. I think you need sometimes a bit of a social lubricant for people to actually speak their mind and kind of let go of some things that you might be a little too concerned about sharing. I can't come up with a good example now. I'm sure later on in a pub he'll come out with the greatest ideas I've had before, but I definitely agree with that statement. Yeah.
Justin.
Yeah, absolutely. Pub culture is great at bringing people together, and that can seed ideas that transform the way we do science. And coming out of COVID, that's going to be a great opportunity to reinvigorate that stimulant for discovery.
Yes. Socially distancing doesn't quite give it that same turbocharge. Alex.
So while we don't promote a culture of alcohol in an inclusive setting, I think all the scientists I know, there is no such thing as after work. You are always at some level, and of course you're taking time out and relaxing and doing other things, but it's somewhere in the back of your mind, something's happening. And if I think about one of the crazy things that I was involved with was watching the movie Batman Begins, where there was this scene where Batman had this futuristic display where they were somehow harnessing the all of the I think cellular signals to then track the bad people. They could kind of see where they were somehow, sci-fi magically. And I kind of looked at that and I was in the movie and thinking, I think we can do that. And then with Coda Wireless, we went on to actually make a product that did that.
Very cool. Leanna.
I think I'd take Alex's view. Things happen anytime, anywhere in the scientist's mind.
Yeah.
My two I find in the shower. I love thinking in the shower. Sometimes I'm naughty and have long showers, therefore. The other thing is I often find I'll just wake up in the middle of the night and you've had something that's irritating you and you think, that's the answer. And it just happens. So I guess your mind is never off it.
Yeah.
Look, that's, and what I do recall for about 25 years of my life, when you're at the dinner table and the kids go, Mum's vagued off again, because you just suddenly caught with the idea and then you have to deny fiercely that you haven't been whilst crossing your fingers behind your back. So, colleagues, we've got such good questions here. Things that I'll just let you know have been asked. I think questions, Justin, you were alluding to it, but how can South Australia secure its electricity supply? Will the clean energy technologies be a focus for the Excite strategy? Absolutely, it's the focus for the industry. That's where South Australia's industry is moving forwards, and enabling industry growth plans is what Excite is about, bringing entrepreneurs into that area as well through the Fix plan. So that's a really key question. Is South Australia open to projects implementing world's best practice to regenerate communities that challenges business as usual? Can I reach out to you for that? And again, some of those key step changes through some of our innovation districts, trying to lift the pace and size of step changing to get to those 2030 envisaged targets. Can we leverage citizen science to support and accelerate research? Inspiring SA is a part of the Excite strategic plan, that program which harnesses Inspiring Australia to really support that great citizen science. Those of you who've been at science at the pub down at Rob Roy will know that you can't get in because the absolute interest on the evenings in talking about science and how some of the data collected by citizen science are making a difference to a whole range of science areas. And I think how and in what way can we become involved in Excite? And our contact details on Excite strategic plan, reach out. Simply reach out. We will then make certain that those areas, diversity for STEM, workplace forum, ensuring those pathways for young people through innovation and skills agenda, but also through the Excite agenda, will be realised. So please don't hold back. If you're watching and you want to ask a question, the scientists are used to good challenging questions, and we have a panel who's been well up to be challenged. So, colleagues, without more ado, I think we can say that after over a year of immensely hard work, data analysis, collection, thinking through the technologies of the future, harnessing lessons learned from other jurisdictions across the world that tells us research, innovation, and new technologies have changed the destination for the cities and the regions that were on hard times as they went through the transition we are going through. Understanding we can have confidence in the quality of the work, the connectivity, availability to us in this city, and being a magnet city for those who think of the future differently and want to contribute to a community that wants to deliver it differently. This is a moment to say thank you to, I think we had 96 consultations, including large audiences from different industries, different communities, researchers, who really did, in harnessing the issues and their potential solutions, help shape this plan. I'd particularly like to say thank you to the Minister for his support and for seeing how and in what way the combination of innovation and skills is at the heart of the state of science, and ensuring there is support for this, and the investment of 8 million in the intermediaries and in the Innovation Challenge is that beginning for Excite. I would particularly, however, like to thank the team. There's a team behind every plan who deal with the late nights, the early mornings, the setting up, the engaging, the making sure the ideas are captured and harnessed, and deal with patience and professionalism and leadership and pride. Thank you to good colleagues. It is a large group of people in innovation and skills that have lent into this. And of course, there's always an engine room. And I say thank you to colleagues who have every morning got up to face another exciting day. So without more ado, I think we should consider the Excite strategic plan, which is the plan which will ensure that SA, the state of science, is on all our number plates. We launch it officially and formally, and we look forward to engaging with the community who've taken the time today to both make sure it can be delivered at scale, the best it can, and as inclusive as it can be, that really reflects the history and future of South Australia. Thank you. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, colleagues.